Hello, I'm Kamal Santamaria. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. This week, it's Brazil. Something's gone very wrong for this BRICS darling to now be one of the world's worst performing economies, all under President Dilma Rousseff's stewardship. Where did it all go wrong? Also this week, banned. India's multi-billion-dollar drug industry falls foul of overseas regulators. So with that wake-up call, can India now overcome the quality issues with some of its drugs? And can it show the world just how beneficial solar energy can be? India is now home to the world's first solar-powered airport, where the benefits carry on well past the runway. Hello everyone, nice to be back with you after a long break down under for me, and thanks of course to Hazem Sika for looking after the show while I was away. This week we're heading to a different down under, in South America, Brazil, where quite frankly, all is not well. President Dilma Rousseff inherited a country growing at a rapid clip, but some 5 years later the economy is heading for recession, unemployment is rising, prices are soaring, and there's a corruption scandal at Petrobras which dates back to her time as chair. Even though there's no suggestion Rousseff has actually done anything wrong, in fact, she's the one who's welcomed an independent investigation, it's not a good look, is it, for a sitting president? Now, this investigation has uncovered this $2 billion worth of kickbacks at the oil giant Petrobras. Executives are alleged to have taken money from contractors for work and funneled money back to politicians. That has understandably sapped business and consumer confidence, but perhaps an even bigger issue for Brazil is its dependence on commodity exports. What they amount to is a giant sticking plaster, if you like, that's actually hidden most of the cracks in the economy. Now the truth is out. Unemployment is running at 7.5%. Inflation's on the rise as well at almost 8%. The currency's tumbled more than 50%. And to top it off, Brazilian debt is at a record high, up from $198 billion in 2009 to $347 billion right now. It is a bleak picture when you contrast it to Rousseff's predecessor, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who said he was, quote, convinced that the 21st century is Brazil's century. But this is the reality. Protesters calling for the impeachment of the current president, about 350,000 of them took part in Sao Paulo, many blaming Rousseff for the country's worst economic slump in a generation. And here's the bottom line for the people of Brazil. A deteriorating economy means the prospect of holding onto your job is a real concern. And that's certainly the case in the auto sector. Hodar Abdelhamid has more on that from Sao Paulo.
It's a family business that manufactures electric switches, plugs, and several other products sold mainly in Brazil and around the region. It grew over the years as Brazil's economy flourished, and it's now feeling the pinch as the country is facing the worst recession in decades. So Claudio Barberini was forced to reduce production by 15% and cut jobs.
Durante a crise, a gente faz ajustes na empresa.
We made adjustments. We changed things as much as we could to save jobs. It's really hard when you fire someone who's been working with you every day. You even know their family, where they live. Here in Brazil, we have close relationships.
The factory is in São Bernardo do Campo, a city that had steadily attracted factories since the 1960s. The whole city grew around the automobile industry, which is one of the worst hit by this crisis. It had a ripple effect, putting the unemployment rate here at nearly double the national average. Thousands of people have lost their jobs over the past few months, 2,800 in July alone. Danilo Gritti worked as a welder since he was 15 at one of the biggest car plants in the city. Now he's 29 years old and jobless.
Because of government policies, it's the workers who are paying the price. Some companies that make spare parts have closed. If things keep on going that way, we're going to become like Detroit.
Danilo's hoping to recover his job through an agreement between his union and the company. But next month he will lose all benefits, so in the meantime he's studying to become a teacher. But many here say the real problem is elsewhere.
Brazil needs to be more transparent. They need to show the rules of the game to investors, otherwise no one will come here. There is need for political stability. The government needs to act quickly, especially because some sectors are suffering more than others.
Brazil is paralyzed by a political crisis that has reduced confidence. And with a corruption scandal of epic proportions still unfolding, credit ratings dwindling, confidence is more elusive than ever.
Isn't it just? Let's expand on all of this with our guest this week, joining us via Skype from Brasilia, political economist Carlos Pio. It's nice to see you again, Carlos. Dilma Rousseff apparently inherited a great Brazil, a great Brazilian economy from Lula da Silva. Is it right to place all the blame for its slide at her feet? It seems a lot of people are protesting directly against her. Yes, she is the president, but where, in your opinion, did this slide really start?
I would say that the slide began back when she was the chief of staff of President Lula, or even before that when she was the energy minister. She started to change the regulatory environment, first in the energy sector, but then it spread to the whole administration. Let's remember that President Lula inherited a country that had done pro-market reforms in the 90s without the support of himself or his party. He decided to keep the regulatory framework and the economic policies so that to calm investors that were really stressed by his election in 2002-03. But when Dilma started to change the regulatory environment of the energy sector, which didn't work, and then was uplifted to the chief of staff of President Lula, and then generalized the changes, including the macroeconomic policies, she created a time bomb for herself. Of course, she didn't know she would be chosen by Lula to be the next presidential candidate and president. But it's not fair to say that she inherited a great country. The country was doing well because of the China boom, as most of Latin America.
We should be fair, though, because you made a very good point there about China. Any country with a dependence on commodity exports and which did a lot of trade with China, like Brazil did, would be adversely affected by the Chinese slowdown. A lot of countries have been adversely affected. So, you know, that is a major factor to take into account for Brazil.
Of course it is. But as we say, the countries have to do their homework, and it's better to do the homework when the economy is going well than when it's doing badly. It's easier politically. You can always say we have to prepare for winters in the future. The point is that Dilma and President Lula before her took advantage of the China boom and also the slowdown of the global economy after the 2008 crisis to say exactly the opposite. They said, we now have a blank check to do anti-cyclical policies when the country was going up, when the economy was improving, actually. Let's remember the audience that Brazil did not suffer so much from the 2008-09 financial crisis.
Okay, so let's start looking at some solutions, because even though it looks like Dilma Rousseff will see out her term and impeachment is looking less likely, it is still hard for any political leader to survive when people are losing their jobs, when inflation's going up, when life is getting tougher. How to turn all these issues around? How does she do it?
Well, first of all, I think that she has to have a longer time horizon. If she falls into the idea that she has to have positive impacts immediately, it's going to be very hard. And it seems that this is picking up. Everybody that talks to her, from the political arena to the sectoral economic arenas, sectoral groups want growth to resume immediately. This is not possible. She is pushed into doing more of the policies that led her into this current situation, doing short-term benefits targeted towards very politically powerful economic groups, like, as I said, the automobile sector. She has to get rid of those policies, get a very orthodox management of the economy, political backing her finance minister, but it doesn't seem that she is convinced of that path. And there is little room for her to move both in the economic side and the political side. The problem is they point to opposite directions. What the society and the economic groups want is exactly what she should not do in the economic side of her policies.
So the short story, it seems, Carlos, is that the people of Brazil will continue to suffer. I mean, I'm reading here, it's a survey of economists who are talking about the recession going on well into 2016.
Exactly. And let me stress, these are, let's say, optimistic views, because, again, it depends on her backing the economic adjustments that are proposed by the financial minister, and that she, uses she uses the little political leverage that she still has to strengthen his position. This is not very likely to happen. But if she falls into the temptation to do the opposite and try to get the country out of the recession, spending her way out of the recession, which would maybe increase her political support in the short term, the consequences in the medium term would be devastating for her.
Carlos Pio, always a pleasure. Thank you for your time. Now, just like Brazil, many other developing nations dependent on the export of oil and commodities have seen their currencies take a hit as a result. Case in point, Malaysia. Its ringgit is the worst performing currency in the Asia-Pacific. And while a falling currency can be a boon for exporters, it also hurts consumers and business owners who depend on imports. Sahel Rahman has this from Kuala Lumpur.
The wheels of industry in motion. This tyre factory employs 100 staff and has an annual turnover of in excess of $3.5 million. Yet the spare parts that keep the machinery moving are bought in US dollars from abroad on a regular basis. Those parts are now up to 20% more expensive and affecting profit margins.
Actually, this fire plant...
Steve Au set up the business over 20 years ago and is now rethinking expansion plans.
Actually, for these 5 years, our planning all changed due to the currency rate. So maybe we won't expand too fast. The spend for this 5 years will be going slow.
Cutting costs also means hiring fewer people with the skills from home and abroad. Economists are already evaluating the impact of Malaysia's falling currency, the ringgit.
I'm especially concerned about local investors, Malaysians, who will want, when they lose confidence, they may want to take out their capital from here. And if there's a capital flight, it will have drastic consequences on the economy.
For years, the Malaysian economy has relied heavily on oil production to develop the country. The price per barrel is currently at an all-time low. The currency has lost 12% of its value against the US dollar in the last 12 months. The governor of the Central Bank of Malaysia has ruled out pegging the ringgit against any other currency or imposing capital controls.
I want to categorically emphasise that we do not expect to peg the currency. The fact that we have a flexible exchange rate regime helps our country to adapt, because if the exchange rate doesn't adjust, then prices and demand has to.
The recent addition of a new goods and services tax implemented last April is worrying Malaysians about a rise in the cost of living.
End of the month, I don't get to save a lot because, as you know, we have 6% GST, and now the ringgit also falling, so we need to spend more, and we save less.
It may look bleak for the ringgit, but analysts say the currency's woes are beyond the government's control. The recent devaluation of the Chinese currency, a potential US interest rate rise, and a $700 million scandal involving the Malaysian Prime Minister are all putting pressure on the currency itself. Economists are saying that it's a time to worry, but not panic, and let's see how the government reacts.
And still ahead on Counting the Cost, the Indian airport that's gone solar. We travel to Cochin International to see how the sun's really come out on both an airport and a city. So we're looking at India in the second half of the show this week. First up, it is the Indian pharmaceutical market. It's been doing pretty well recently, able to capitalise on the expiry of patents held by mostly Western nations. The long-told story is that Indian companies produce drugs cheaper and then sell them back to the United States and Europe. India's drugs industry is expected to be worth $20 billion by the end of this year. 10 years ago, it was only $6 billion. But the EU recently banned around 700 drugs products from India, which could amount to losses of as much as $1.2 billion. Europe's an important market. Over the last year, India exported $15.4 billion worth of pharmaceutical products. Europe received $3 billion worth, or 20% of that total. And what may surprise is that only $1 billion of that was these generic drugs, which goes some way to debunking the theory that India is only making so-called copycat drugs. We got one of our India correspondents, Faiz Jamil, to find out more about the ban on Indian drugs in the European Union and the United States for that matter. This is his report.
India's multi-billion-dollar drug industry has been hit by a ban on 700 generic drugs. The EU regulator alleges the clinical trials on the drugs were manipulated. The drugs will be banned in all 28 member states until retesting can be done. But generic manufacturers here say banning all the drugs based on a technical issue is unfair.
Because the manufacturer have already done so much of the work on those molecules, they should be given some chances and it should be analyzed in another lab.
Even if and when that happens, those in the generic drug industry say the damage to their reputation has already been done.
I'll say we have lost the prospective buyers which we could have got and as a contract manufacturer. Secondly, if you talk about reputation of Indian companies or the small Indian companies like us, we will face a lot of difficulty in registering the products.
The fear is the bad reputation could spread and affect sales in other countries, including the lucrative US market.
Many of the drugs being banned by the EU are still widely available here and in many other countries. Local manufacturers are asking the Indian government to do what it can to lift the ban. But this whole issue goes beyond a single industry. It's already affecting negotiations for a free trade deal between the European Union and India.
India has cancelled talks that were set for the end of August in response to the drug ban, further stalling the free trade deal that was supposed to be signed last year. This trade expert and former government consultant says the free trade deal has already been delayed over issues of human rights and trade protectionism, and the drug ban will slow negotiations even more.
If you bring in a new irritant, which was not expected to be irritant, and which is a major exporter, then at some point the Indian side is going to say, then what is the point in going through with the FTA anyway?
India is signaling it's willing to wait to ensure its major industries get the best deal. Trade analysts warn that the EU's drug ban may end up being a case of bad medicine, pushing India to focus trade in other parts of the world.
Let's discuss this further then with Dilip Shah, who's joining us from New Delhi. He is the Secretary General of the Indian Pharmaceuticals Alliance and CEO of the Vision Consultancy Group as well. Dilip, we were speaking off camera earlier about the intricate details of this ban. You were concerned about how the tests were conducted. But I want to deal with the broader issues here about India's pharmaceutical market. Do you feel India is being specifically targeted here? Is there a vendetta? Do people feel the quality of the drugs is not good enough? What is the underlying issue?
Let me give one more example of quality of drugs from US FDA. The recall of medicines by US FDA from American companies was 1,156 in 2014. The number of recalls from Indian companies were only 56, and India supplies 40% of the generics sold in the USA. To answer your question, the broad question, could it be retaliation for the compulsory license that Germany did this? Could it be that Indian companies are so competitive in terms of pricing that it hurts the European companies? Could it be that in government procurement for your health programs, the Indian companies supply quality products at much better prices which help these governments to contain their healthcare expenditure? Now, it could be any of these reasons. It could only be a speculative if I were to say that yes, these were the reasons why this has happened. We suspect that there is something more than meets the eye on this ban, and that's the reason why Government of India came forward.
And so are you concerned then, sorry to interrupt you there, are you concerned about economic impact here? The numbers we have show that 20% of your market is Europe. $3 billion worth was accounted for by Europe. That could be a big hit for one industry to take.
Well, this particular episode may not have a large impact, but we are concerned about the perception of Indian pharmaceutical industry that is being created, and whoever is behind this has a certain motive, whether it's a commercial motive or some other motive. But the perception is being created that Indian drugs are not safe, and therefore doctors may stop prescribing or using these medicines. This is our concern.
And it's important for the wider Indian economy as well, isn't it? You've already mentioned there were those EU-India trade talks, the free trade talks that were underway and was supposed to resume. You don't want something like this affecting trade, wider trade between two potentially very big, important partners.
You're right. And neither government of India wants it, nor do we want it. That wider trade issues should be impacted by this. But we, at the same time, we do expect that if one inspector or one agency makes a mistake and this is brought out, then the corrective action must be taken. Being unfair will not resume the trade talks. If fairness is brought back, I'm sure both sides would be willing to resume the talk.
Dilip Shah joining us from New Delhi. We thank you very much for your time. We end with a perhaps more positive, progressive story out of India. It's to do with renewable energy. See, in this world, there's a lot of talk about going carbon neutral, but Cochin International Airport is a place that's walking the talk, or perhaps flying it. Divya Gopalan has this report from what is the world's first fully solar-powered airport.
Cochin Airport is known for its temple-like architecture and for being India's fourth largest airport in terms of international traffic. But ask anyone about its latest environmental breakthrough using solar energy, and this is the reaction you'll get.
I'd say you're bluffing. You're serious? Wow.
Yeah, I'm very surprised. And I'm very happy for the Indian people.
Even the man behind the idea was unaware what he was doing was unique.
We realized that the Kerala State Electricity Board was actually charging a little on the higher side. We thought, why not we go in for the green power? So the whole idea came in. We worked out, like, we consume about 48,000 of units of power a day. So why not we produce almost equivalent to that?
The project took 6 months to set up and cost $10 million. The airport expects to recoup all costs within 5 years. Next to the airport, in an area for a proposed cargo terminal, there are more than 46,000 solar panels. The 12-megawatt plant will provide around 50,000 units a day to cover all the airport's electricity needs.
The carbon footprints goes down, so very good, because it is eco-friendly, renewable energy. So this is to be practiced in almost all places.
The solar panels are expected to last for 25 years, and during that time will cut 300,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions. That's the equivalent of planting 3 million trees.
This falls in line with the government's targets to increase the use of solar power by 5 times by 2022. India is heavily reliant on coal and is the world's third largest polluter. So, over the next decade, the government is planning to invest around $100 billion into the solar sector.
The government is hailing this as a model for the rest of the country and has already directed other airports to start incorporating solar energy into their daily operations.
And that is our show for this week, but there's more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. It takes you to our page, which has individual reports and links and episodes which Hazem was hosting for the last few weeks. You can also get in touch with us by tweeting either me at KamalAJE. Our business editor is at Abid Oliver Ali, and do use the hashtag AJCTC, or just drop us an email. Counting the Cost at aljazeera.net is the address. That is it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Kamal Santa Maria from the whole team. Thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.